and on behalf of Harris Interactive, welcome to our 4th Social Life webcast. For those of you joining us today for the first time, Social Life is the most comprehensive survey of UK social media use. We regularly interview a large and representative sample of online UK social media users, and we ask them which social platforms they've heard of, which they use, how often they use them, how long they use them for, why they use them, which devices they use to access them, and a whole lot more besides. For SocialLife4, we spoke to 5,500 social media users aged 11 or above in May 2014. And today we'll be comparing this new data with how things looked back in September 2013. For many sectors and market research trackers, nothing really happens in 8 months, but social media continues to be a very fluid, exciting environment, and I've got lots of new developments to share with you today. Firstly, a quick reminder that Social Life covers 22 social platforms, including established favourites like Facebook, Twitter and YouTube, specialist sites with a social element like Spotify and Mumsnet, as well as newer sites like Snapchat and Vine that have only been around for a couple of years. I'll be looking at which sites are gaining traction, which are losing ground, and which market demographics are driving these changes. And to make the information more actionable, we've profiled users of over 150 brands now across many different product and service categories in the 12 months or so that we've been running Social Life. Please get in touch with us if you'd like further information on how your customers are engaging with social media. Let's kick things off with a review of the latest usage and awareness statistics, beginning with a look at aided brand awareness, which we can also think of as name recognition. There are no major surprises here at the top of the ladder. Most people have been familiar with established Big Four sites like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Google Plus for a while now. A number of other platforms continue to have high name recognition but are less used nowadays, as we'll see shortly. And these include MySpace, Flickr, Friends Reunited and Bebo. And several sites have continued to build awareness. Those highlighted here with an asterisk include Facebook-owned Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Tumblr, Snapchat, Reddit and Vine. But despite this strong growth, we should acknowledge that two of the biggest climbers, Snapchat, which is up 20 points, and Twitter-owned Vine, which is up 12 points, they're both still recognised by fewer than half of all social media users. But of course, not all these platforms are targeting all social media users. And if we compare 16 to 24-year-olds, shown here in the lighter blue colour, with the population as a whole, we see that a number of platforms, including the two I just mentioned, have much higher name recognition among younger consumers. Snapchat, for example, is ranked 7th instead of 15th, just above MySpace among this audience, and Instagram also climbs a couple of places up to 5th. Moving on from name recognition, we capture lots of usage data in Social Life too, and we've summarised it in this chart, which plots site membership horizontally against daily use on the vertical axis. The size of the bubbles represents the volume of original content, by which I mean posts, tweets, snaps, etc., per user, per month for each platform. So what does all of this data tell us? Well, of course, first of all, we see very clearly how Facebook, in the top right-hand corner, continues to dominate the UK social media landscape, with almost universal site membership and high daily usage as well. YouTube, Twitter and Google Plus form a second tier of platforms in terms of usage, and brands with growing awareness, including Instagram and Snapchat, still have got lots of ground to make up. One final point to note is that Snapchat, the large yellow bubble in the bottom left-hand corner, has comfortably the highest usage frequency among its user base, with 31 snaps per user per month, compared with 19 posts on Facebook and 17 tweets. So let's summarise this with a few animals. It is market research after all. Facebook is clearly the king of the jungle, head and shoulders above other platforms among the total social media population. Instagram, Snapchat and Pinterest in particular are the hares, moving quickly and very much the up-and-coming sites. Let's have a look at some of the numbers for Instagram, Snapchat and Pinterest. Everything's moving in the right direction on this chart. Dark blue here is May 2014. And the numbers to really focus on are the active users, with Instagram up from 7 to 12% and Snapchat more than doubling its active user base from 4 to 10% during this 8-month period. YouTube, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn and the others featured here are the snails. This is because there's been very little movement from YouTube and Twitter in particular in the last 8 months. And we'll come back to look at Twitter again later on, as this lack of movement here is causing it problems internationally as well. And finally, the dodos, the likes of MySpace, Ask.fm, which was briefly in the news in 2013 for negative reasons, Bebo and Flickr, to name just a few. These are platforms that appear to have lost all momentum from a social perspective. If we now focus on 16 to 24-year-olds, who are the most prolific social media users, we can see that Facebook is coming under greater pressure from YouTube, Twitter, and also from Snapchat and Instagram, as things stand right now. It's also worth highlighting the relatively larger Instagram bubble on this chart, larger than both Facebook and Twitter, with an average of 28 posts per month per user, although still some way down on the average of 39 snaps on Snapchat. We've just looked at 16 to 24-year-olds in isolation, but this slide highlights the extent to which this demographic is different. They're active on an average of 4.2 sites, compared with 25 to 34-year-olds who are active on 3, and the over 65s who are likely to be active on Facebook and possibly one other platform, if any. And it's the last 8 months in particular that have seen very significant growth in active site usage among 16 to 24-year-olds. And in particular, again, Snapchat and Instagram, which are up 25 and 14 percentage points, respectively, among this demographic. Active use of Snapchat and Instagram is also up significantly among the younger 11 to 15-year-old demographic that we survey. And looking forward, this trend towards Snapchat and Instagram looks set to continue, with significant numbers of 16 to 24-year-olds claiming they're likely to stop using Facebook, Twitter and Google Plus in the next 12 months. In this new survey, we asked for an estimate of how much time users have been active on each platform the day before they were interviewed. We interview on each day of the week in roughly equal numbers, so this data includes weekends as well as weekdays. And it reveals some interesting data, with Facebook, which averages almost 2 hours per day, used for half an hour longer than the second placed YouTube. Twitter averages just over an hour, which is interesting because it's recently been trying to increase the amount of time that users spend on it, after coming under fire from Wall Street for slowing user growth, and it's been trying to do this by buying online music services like SoundCloud and Spotify. If we break down Facebook usage by gender and age, we can see again that the 16 to 24-year-olds are most active with almost 3 hours on average. And this same age pattern is repeated across most other platforms. The exception is LinkedIn, which sees longer periods of use among 25 to 44-year-olds. Facebook remains the most important social media site for over 3/5 of social media users, despite 3% slippage since September. Facebook broke down a couple of weeks ago, and people trying to log on to the site were faced with a message saying, "Something went wrong. We're working to get it fixed as soon as we can." The shutdown drew attention across the web, with many taking to Twitter to ask what all the fuss was about, often in a rather sarcastic manner, at least on my timeline. The problem was resolved very quickly, but it got us wondering what a representative sample of Twitter users think about Facebook, not just the vocal few. And in fact, active Twitter users are more likely to choose Facebook as the most important social media site by a clear margin, with only 22% opting for Twitter. Now, these vox pops help explain why Facebook is so important to UK consumers, even to avid Twitter fans.
I use Facebook because it's easy to get information about people and see what they're up to. Facebook's not as interesting for me as Twitter, but all my friends are on Facebook, so that's why I use it.
Yeah, I joined Facebook primarily to follow my daughter who's gone travelling abroad. It helps me keep in touch with her. I don't use it for much more than that. And similarly with Twitter, I've joined that for work purposes. Pretty much they asked us all to get an account, but it's not something that I use on a personal basis.
My friends and family live all over the country, so Facebook allows me to keep in contact with them easily. I can look at their photos and instant message and stuff.
Facebook's a great tool for keeping in touch with family and friends, but I don't see why I'd be signed up to anymore. I don't want to know what's going on in strangers' lives.
Because I've got family who live miles away, and I find it the easiest way to communicate with them. And also I've got 2 small children who are changing all the time, so I constantly uploading photographs for my family and friends to see.
I love Facebook because from living overseas, it helps me keep in contact with friends and family from all over the world. So not only South Africa, but Australia and Austria and Germany and that kind of thing. I probably play the games too much. I absolutely love them, but I probably spend too much time playing them. Naughty me.
I love Facebook because I have so many friends and family overseas. It's a great way for me to stay in touch with them, for them to see my trip photos, and for me to just generally know what's going on in their day-to-day lives.
And it's not just older social media users who favour Facebook. Facebook's the most important platform for 49% of 11 to 24-year-olds in our UK survey. Now, some interesting context here is that Instagram is now the most important social network among US teens, according to a report from Piper Jaffray, with Facebook continuing to slide from the position of dominance that it held a couple of years ago. Now, Facebook's acquisition of Instagram is looking like an increasingly clever move. If it can't convince US teens that Facebook's cool, at least it can still reach them on Instagram. As we saw earlier, we quantify the number of posts, tweets, snaps, etc. that each user makes on each platform each month. The average total volume across all platforms in May was 39, which is pretty consistent with September 2013. And clearly some platforms are used more frequently than others, as we see here on the left. Snapchat has easily the highest content frequency among those who use it, and then there's little to choose between Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And from this data we can calculate each platform's total share of voice. Facebook's greater overall reach gives it 42% share, which is way higher than second place Twitter at 13.5%. But Facebook's share has been somewhat eroded, down almost 7% since September, and it's Snapchat and Instagram that are responsible for this. As well as looking at the platforms consumers use, we're also tracking the devices they use to access them. And there's a very clear trend towards using smaller devices, and in particular smartphones, but also tablets, in the last 8 months. Pretty much every major platform has experienced this trend, with Facebook leading the way with 10% uplift. LinkedIn is the only platform to see negative growth in mobile use, and recent reports suggest that LinkedIn's trying to address this with a new app later this year that'll specifically focus on achieving its stated ambition of 50% mobile engagement. And we thought it'd be interesting to investigate how much money UK consumers are spending on products and services as a consequence of paid and earned social media interactions. Overall, we established that 14% of social media users have bought something they initially came across on a social media platform, either after coming across an advertisement or by following through on a recommendation from one of their contacts. 16 to 24-year-olds are twice as likely to have made a purchase in this way. Now, interestingly, slightly more have bought via a recommendation than have bought via an ad. And not surprisingly, it's Facebook that's most responsible for generating purchases via either route. Social media users purchase a wide range of items via these routes, with books, clothes and music most popular overall. Now, stereotypes hold true in this data, with video games topping the list of recommended items for men and clothes comfortably the #1 category for women via social media ads. The social media users who do buy things in this way spend very significant sums of money, on average around £78 per month on items that originate from recommendations and £80 per month on items seen in advertisements. If we gross up these numbers, total annual spend is £2.4 billion from social media recommendations and £1.9 billion from social media ads. The calculations we used are available in an infographic that you can download from our website. Another topic that we like to track is the use of social media to complain about poor service, as distinct from these more traditional methods of complaining. Most social media users never complain about service providers on social media platforms. Perhaps they never receive poor service. However, a third have done so, and these figures are up significantly, by 7% since September. 1 in 10 now complain in this way whenever they have a problem, and the incidence increases significantly among heavier social media users, peaking at 45% among 16 to 24-year-old men. We asked those who use social media in this way to tell us which types of service providers they complain about. Mobile network operators top the list, just ahead of retailers and internet service providers. Financial service providers are least complained about. Now, I'm not sharing the names of the most complained about companies today, but do get in touch or request a copy of the full report if you'd like to know who they are. 46% claim an altruistic motive to their bash tagging of service providers. They believe it's important to let other people know about poor service provision. Whereas 36% believe that bash tagging gets better results than other methods of complaining. And the stats tend to bear this out too, with 70% of all social media complaints at least partly resolved. But social media brand engagement's not all about bash tagging, of course, and a recent study by Conversion, which analysed direct user interactions with 20 leading global brands on Twitter, found that 55% were positive in nature, 25% were neutral. In SocialLife4, we asked social media users to rate upwards of 50 brands on what they've read about them on social media in the last few months. The results confirm that it's typically service providers and newspapers that come across least favourably on social media. Amazon, Google, eBay, Cadbury are most likely to benefit from positive word of mouth on social media. And finally today we're going to focus on the plight of Twitter, which was once the darling of the social media world, but has recently come under pressure due to lacklustre international growth, plunging stock performance, and a raft of senior level departures. In response, Twitter's announced and begun to implement a series of changes, including new Facebook-style profile designs, which have generally split opinion, as well as a new mute feature and various picture sharing options. We decided to investigate whether these new innovations are likely to stimulate the growth that Twitter's searching for. Firstly, let's remind ourselves of the challenges that Twitter faces. And we can see here that Twitter use is largely confined to younger consumers, with sharp decline in use among those aged 35 and above, despite almost universal awareness. We described the recent changes to Twitter users and non-users alike and asked what impact they would have on usage. Overall, it would appear that more will be needed from Twitter, since just as many current account holders claim they'll use the platform less or stop using it altogether as intend to use Twitter more in future. And what about the people who don't have an account with Twitter? Well, the vast majority are also unconvinced by the changes, but 1 in 6 claim they'll take a look. So again, this is a fairly lukewarm reaction, so perhaps these changes are not radical enough and Twitter needs to go further. Or maybe it's gone as far as it can. Okay, so let's round things off with a quick wrap-up. Firstly, we've seen today that 16 to 24-year-olds are largely responsible for overall growth in social media use in the last 8 months, and in particular for driving up use of Snapchat and Instagram. The more established platforms need to monitor this threat without doubt, but Facebook remains dominant and comfortably the most important social media site, for now at least. Secondly, there's been a massive increase in consumers accessing social platforms on smaller mobile devices. This trend looks set to continue, and platforms that are not able to adapt to this change in consumer demand will likely go the way of the dodos that we talked about earlier on. Thirdly, SocialLife4 confirms that social media is now a very commercial environment, and brands can capitalise through earned as well as paid interactions. As you saw, we estimate that £2.4 billion is generated per annum from social media recommendations, and social media advertisements generate slightly less, approximately £1.9 billion per annum. And last but not least, we saw that consumers are increasingly prepared to use social media to vent their frustrations at poor service provision. Increasingly, this will help shape how consumers perceive brands and service providers more generally, and those that have got their social act together are strongly positioned to capitalise on this. That's all from Harris today. Thanks for taking the time to join us, and we hope that you found the session interesting and useful. A fuller report will be sent to you in the next few days, so please do look out for this and feel free to share it with your colleagues and your agencies. If you'd like more information about any of the points that I've covered, my contact details will appear shortly. The next wave of Social Life is scheduled to take place in September. If you've any social media topics you'd like us to investigate, please get in touch.